Disclaimer: the game me and Tropical Poptart are about to review is one of the most notoriously violent video games of all time. It is so violent, in fact, that it was partially responsible for the creation of the United States Entertainment Software Rating Board. If you are made easily uncomfortable by images of bones, internal organs, or violence, I think you should watch a different video. Also, there is an after-credit scene, so stick around till the very end. Greetings, Earthlings. Speedy the Enderman here, and Mortal Kombat's better than Street Fighter! Oops. Had to say it eventually. I'm just gonna come out and say it. Mortal Kombat is the best fighting game franchise. There are others that can be just as fun, like Tekken or Street Fighter or Injustice, but none of these franchises have been as long-lasting as Mortal Kombat. It makes sense that the first fighting game I would ever review would be for my favorite fighting game franchise. The thing is, when a series becomes popular, it is only natural to wonder where it got started. It is for that reason that I am going to review the original Mortal Kombat trilogy. In that case, I gotta buy these games on the PlayStation Store. Well, maybe if I try hard enough, I can get the Super Nintendo ROMs of these games onto my Super Nintendo Classic. I mean, the process can't be that hard. I mean, it's really simple. All you gotta do... I have no computer skills. Looks like we're just gonna have to use an emulator, folks. And I know just the one. Sega. Sega is an emulator site that allows you to play Sega Genesis games. It also allows you to play ROM hacks of original Sega Genesis games and even some homebrew games. On top of that, you can play all of them in full screen if you want to. Unfortunately, Sega isn't a perfect emulator site. Not even close. The frame rates with some of the games can be spotty, and the music can sometimes glitch out. And if that's noticeable in the footage, that's why. To my knowledge, the original Mortal Kombat games didn't have frame rate and music tearing problems. Now, without further ado...
Hello, Speedy.
Poptart of the tropical variety? What are you doing here?
I've come to take out my from you for trying to...
Alright, now listen. I already told you that I abandoned that quest long ago. Apparently, the Ender King is very xenophobic. He hates all humans because he thinks they're all trying to kill every single Enderman there is. I've already taken a path to peace where I help humanity instead of hurt it. Therefore, you've no reason to kill me.
How can I trust you after you so blatantly tried to kill me?
Well, maybe you could help me. I am reviewing Mortal Kombat. Would you like to be of assistance?
No.
You get to play as Scorpion.
Count me in.
Then why don't we regret our life choices once again by reviewing Mortal Kombat, starting off with its story. Mortal Kombat takes place in a universe that is ruled by several omnipotent beings called the Elder Gods, and they made a lot of realms. Earthrealm, the Outworld, the Netherrealm, Edenia, the Order Realm, and the Chaos Realm. Although, the only ones you really need to know about are Earthrealm, the Netherrealm, and the Outworld. Earthrealm is essentially just Earth, the Outworld is just a more dangerous and intimidating version of Earth, and the Netherrealm is this universe's version of the fiery underworld. Every single realm...
Wait. You're definitely saying realm too often. Let's come up with a new word to replace it.
Okay. What word did you have in mind?
Chicken tender.
Okay, then. Every chicken tender has a guardian, and the guardians are called undergods. Earth Chicken Tender has a guardian called Raiden, the undergod of thunder. Years ago, he discovered that Shao Kahn, Emperor of the Outworld, wants to merge his chicken tender with Raiden's. Knowing that such a process would destroy Earth Chicken Tender, Raiden begged the Elder Gods to do something. On that day, the Mortal Kombat tournament was born. Every 50 years, the best fighters from each chicken tender fight to represent either Earth Chicken Tender or the Outworld. If Earth loses 10 tournaments in a row, Shao Kahn will be allowed to invade Earth Chicken Tender. This game takes place during the 10th tournament, and Earth has lost every other tournament.
To make matters worse, the entire tournament is run by Shang Tsung, a soul sorcerer who works for Shao Kahn. For such a detailed story, how's the story presentation?
Well, there are no before-game cutscenes, except one that lists the definitions of code, no in-game exposition, and no foreshadowing images. Heck, you're never told about anything until after you beat the game. That doesn't bother me much, though, since A, this was an arcade game, B, it's a fighting game, and C, there were probably limitations to what they could store on cartridges. That said, it's still a shame that the console versions of these games couldn't have gotten more effort in terms of story presentation. You know what did have a lot of effort put into it? The general presentation. You might have noticed that this game has a very unique visual style. Mortal Kombat uses digitized graphics. That is, they recorded actors and costumes doing the in-game movements, and pixelated every frame from the recording. This ends up making every single sprite look incredibly detailed. While I generally like the digitized graphics style, I do have one nitpick. While the stages and characters look distinguishable, the movements of the characters can be rather simplistic at times. I'm not going to complain about this too much since pixelating does take a lot of time, but I just wanted to mention it. What do you think, Tropical Poptart?
I have always been a fan of the art style of old games, with their limitations by the pixel limit. It gives them character, and I'm sure digitizing real footage was revolutionary for the time. I can't say it aged well, but it's a nice look overall.
The music is just as distinct as the visuals it complements. Depending on what hardware you play it on, you could listen to one of 3 soundtracks. We've mainly heard the Genesis version. Every track sounds very Asiatic. Not only that, but almost every theme in the game perfectly fits the tone of a fighting game. There is only one song I think was butchered in the Genesis port, though I'll talk more about that later. Tropical Pop-Tart, your thoughts?
Geez, no need to be a baboon. Anyways, as far as the soundtrack goes, the kind of techno-Asian mix is good to set the tone of the game.
But a detailed story and great graphics mean nothing without good gameplay, and thankfully, Mortal Kombat has that in spades. Firstly, as you might have guessed, the main goal of Mortal Kombat is to fight and defeat anyone who gets in your way. This game doesn't start guns a-blazing though. When you start the game, you are immediately given the choice between 2 things: Start and Options. If you select Options, you can adjust the game's difficulty and how many continues you have. We'll be reviewing this game on its easiest difficulty because newcomers would do that. Trust me when I say that this will paint my reviews of the sequels in an interesting light. Press Start and you will be taken to the character select screen. You can pick from 7 unique characters who either fight for the Outworld or Earth Chicken Tender. Tropical Poptart, list the characters.
Nicolas Cage, a Hollywood actor who is very narcissistic. Sonya Blade, a military sergeant looking for the outlaw Kano. Raiden, the undergod of thunder. Liu Kang, Raiden's star student. Scorpion, an arachnid. Captain Cold, an ice ninja. Aussie, an arsonist who's only in the tournament for money. No matter who you pick, you will get the same action-packed experience. At the same time, every character plays differently and has unique moves. After you select your character, you're taken to a fight ladder. Due to reasons we will discuss later, depending on who you pick, you will fight every character in the game in a certain order. Thankfully, only one playable character could be considered overpowered, and that's Sonya Blade. She has legs that can grab you, kick you in midair, and in a twist of fate, she proposes to you with rings instead of the other way around.
During every fight, you'll notice that there are 2 health bars, one for you and one for the AI. Your goal is to get the AI's health bar down to 0. If you fail to do this, you will lose a life, and you will have to use a continue. If you succeed, you will get to finish your opponent. But I mean, considering that the worst thing we've seen in a fighting game would be the characters getting dizzy in Street Fighter, how bad could the finishing moves really be? Alexa, I would like for you to schedule an appointment with my psychologist. Yeah, if there's one thing people remember about Mortal Kombat, it's the fatalities. A fatality is a dedicated finishing move that the player can perform on their opponent after defeating them. Every character has one, though the fact that each character only has one fatality is kind of disappointing. As you witnessed earlier with Kano, the fatalities can be pretty grisly. However, there are a few that are just plain ridiculous. Liu Kang can shoot fireballs, and his fatality is just a side flip and an uppercut. Your local friendly cheerleader can perform Liu Kang's fatality for God's sake.
Come on, step it up!
The biggest problem with the fatalities is the same as the story. The game tells you nothing about them. Other than that, there's a certain button combination you have to perform in order to do a fatality, depending on what character you use. You're probably thinking, Speedy, if the fatalities require button inputs, then how are the controls? Fortunately, the controls for this game are pretty good. You've got your low punch, your low kick, your high punch, and high kick. Combine all that with a block button and bing bang boom, the controls make sense! Actually, there is something that doesn't make any sense. Can you guess what it is? There is no pause button. Why? The start button works everywhere else in the game, so why isn't there a pause function? What does the game expect me to do? Leave the game running when I have to take a leak? Because if so, that's imbecilic. Because if you leave the game running, your character is going to die faster than a polar bear in Arizona. Actually, let's talk about how often you die. I don't normally talk about difficulty. I mean, I've only done it once in my Mega Man 3 review when I talked about the Dark Robots. The thing is, as a critic of games, I don't want my lack of skills in certain areas to affect the credibility of my reviews. At the same time, sometimes there are games that have terrible difficulty balancing, and distinguishing the two is important for making solid reviews. In the case of these 3 games, I feel as though the difficulty design is flawed.
Firstly, remember the buttons we mentioned earlier? Well, you can press them in certain combinations to pull off character-specific moves. Scorpion can launch a spear, Liu Kang can do a super kick, and Raiden can shoot lightning bolts. While these moves are cool, the game does nothing to tell you about them. And you have to remember this came out when the internet wasn't a thing. We only knew the moves because we got them online and wrote them down. This is already a problem in and of itself, but on top of that, the AI fighters are so difficult at times that it's like the game expects you to know and spam the moves. As a new player especially, you would find this infuriating, and I did when I tried it out.
Even on the easiest difficulty, this is a problem, especially in the latter half of the game. This single-handedly makes this game nearly impossible for newcomers to enjoy. Additionally, considering how few moves each character has, you can only imagine how similar every fight feels, no matter who you're fighting. Actually, that ties into another problem, the repetitive gameplay.
To elaborate on Speedy's last point, I do think it would be unbearably repetitive, and I'd only played the game for 20 minutes. Being a kid playing this in 1992, I could understand why this wasn't a problem. The point of this game in an arcade was mainly to beat each other's high scores, and gaming overall didn't have as high of an expectation for replayability. But seeing it from the eyes of a modern gamer, I don't think it would be very fun after a while.
Now, that's not to say there is nothing to break up the monotony of fighting the same way over and over again. But after about 3 fights, you get to play a minigame called Test Your Might. Basically, you have to chop through some random item by building up your power meter. You do this by mashing low punch and low kick. If you can get your power meter over the white line and press start, your character will successfully chop through the item. Press start at any other point, however, and you will fail. There is also a 10-second timer to add tension. All you get from beating this minigame is points, which, as Tropical Poptart mentioned earlier, means absolutely nothing nowadays. Maybe if they made it so that you get to continue for winning, it would be better, but I digress. I like the idea of using minigames to add variety to the gameplay, and it's a shame that there couldn't have been more. Unlike any other game I've reviewed, the endgame actually starts at the midpoint of the game and not near the end. As your character goes further up the fight ladder, you will be met with a few different kinds of fights, each one more difficult than the last. First, there's the mirror match, where you must face an AI-controlled version of your character. These would be confusing if it weren't for the fact that the computer-controlled character is slightly darker than the player character. Then there are the endurance matches, where you're forced to fight 2 different opponents per round. And this is where Mortal Kombat's difficulty problems really start to rear their ugly heads. Normally the concept of 2 people combining their moves would be interesting, but during the endurance matches, the characters don't combine their moves at all. They just appear, one after the other. What is pretty interesting is that the third endurance match always takes place in this weird cave area. And victory is mine. Wait a minute. Why is the game focusing so much on my victor? All jokes aside, the fight with Goro is probably the most solid part of the game.
What do you mean?
Let me explain. In most modern fighting games, developers feel the need to give boss characters the most overpowered attacks imaginable. Goro is not overpowered. While his attacks do hit like a lorry going 99 miles an hour, he's still very slow. That is so clever, not only because it makes the fight itself more balanced while still making it challenging, but it also makes sense as a weakness within the universe itself. Goro is a 4-armed, half-human, half-dragon creature called a Shogun. Of course he's going to be slower than you. And that's not even the best part. The best part of this fight is the music. At least, in the arcade version. The Genesis version sucks. It's so slow and it just drones on. I mean, just listen to it. I guess the argument could be made that the slower theme makes Goro creepy, but I don't think we should see Goro as creepy. I think we should see Goro as a monster, and the arcade version perfectly captures that.
But despite Goro's greatness, he is not the final boss. Shang Tsung is. He is easier than Goro, although he is still kind of challenging. He can shoot fireballs either upwards or forwards. He can also turn into any character in the game, including Goro. If you've made it this far in the game, you'll beat Shang Tsung no problem. It's too bad Goro wasn't the final boss.
And what do you get for beating the game? Well, depending on what character you pick, after you defeat Shang Tsung, you get to watch a cutscene explaining why your character joined the tournament and what they did afterwards. Which is pretty neat. I mean, It's not better than having cutscenes at the beginning or during the game, but still, at least the game tried to explain some of the stuff that happened in it. That, folks, was Mortal Kombat on the Sega Genesis. As someone who has played all three of the original games already, I can certainly say that the first game was a very solid start to the franchise. The story is intriguing, the visuals are impeccable, the music is uniquely fitting, and the bosses are actually balanced. What are the odds? What did you think, Tropical Poptart?
I can say all of the same as Speedy as far as the overall experience goes. There are not many things to complain about as a newcomer. The controls are simple, gameplay as well, and even though I can't say I'm great at the game, the difficulty settings seem balanced enough. Although like any game, the very hard setting is ridiculous. My only real complaint is repetition, as stated earlier. It's a fun gaming experience. I give it a Keanu Reeves out of 10.
I want to take this time to thank you for your help on this review, Tropical Poptart. I appreciate your inputs. And as for you, dear viewer, next time on this segment, I will cover the sequel, Mortal Kombat 2, and see if it deserves the praise that it gets online. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
He doesn't suspect a thing.
Good. This will be very interesting.